The massive space station hung in orbit above Centris Prime like a glittering jewel against the black void. Inside its gleaming halls, 12 different alien species had gathered for what they considered routine business. The Galactic Council had been making these decisions for over 3,000 years, and today would be no different. Or so they thought. David Wells adjusted his uniform as he walked through the corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The human diplomat had never seen anything like this place. The walls themselves seemed to be alive, shifting colors based on the emotional states of those who passed by. Creatures he had only dreamed about in science fiction movies floated, walked and slithered past him without giving him a second glance. The meeting hall was enormous, with seats arranged in a perfect circle. Each species had their own section designed for their specific needs. The Vorthak delegation sat in pools of liquid crystal that hummed with soft music. The luminary existed as pure energy beings, contained within specially designed force field, chambers that sparkled like captured starlight. The Grex Empire representatives, massive reptilian creatures covered in natural armor, dominated one entire section with their imposing presence. David took his seat in the simple chair that had been provided for humanity. It looked pathetically small and plain compared to the elaborate seating around him. The other delegates whispered among themselves in languages that his universal translator could barely manage. He caught fragments of their conversations, and none of it sounded welcoming. "The new species has arrived," announced Resonance Prime, the lead Vorthak representative. Its voice sounded like wind chimes mixed with the echo of distant thunder. "The humans from the third planet of what they call the Sol system." A wave of what David could only describe as laughter rippled through the chamber, though it came in forms he had never heard before. The luminary flickered in patterns that his translator informed him indicated amusement. The Grex made rumbling sounds deep in their throats that shook the floor beneath his feet. "Tell us, human," said Admiral Rex of the Grex Empire, his massive head turning toward David with predatory interest. "What makes your species think it deserves a place among civilized beings?" David had prepared for this question. He stood and activated the holographic display that showed Earth's achievements. Images of cities, art, music, and scientific discoveries filled the air above him. Humanity has developed faster than light travel within the past 50 years. We have unified our planet under a single government dedicated to peace and exploration. We have eliminated poverty, disease, and warfare on our world. The silence that followed was not the impressed quiet he had hoped for. Instead, it felt like the moment before a storm breaks. "Faster than light travel?" Rex's voice dripped with condescension. "You mean those primitive fusion drives that leave radiation trails visible from 3 systems away? How wonderfully subtle. And you claim to have eliminated warfare," added a luminary representative, its energy form pulsing with what the translator called skeptical amusement. "Yet our intelligence shows your species has been in constant conflict for your entire recorded history. Wars over resources, territory, beliefs, skin color. How does a species with such violent tendencies suddenly become peaceful?" David felt heat rise in his cheeks, but kept his voice steady. "We learned from our mistakes. Humanity has grown beyond our violent past. We now work together for the common good of all people, consuming other life forms for sustenance," observed a delegate from the plant-like Thornwood Collective. "How barbaric. We absorb nutrients directly from stellar radiation and mineral-rich soil. The thought of killing and eating other living beings is revolting." "Your technology is laughably primitive," continued Rex, clearly enjoying himself. "Kinetic weapons, Chemical explosives? We have moved beyond such crude tools millennia ago. Energy weapons, molecular disruptors, quantum field manipulation. These are the tools of advanced civilizations. More laughter filled the chamber. David realized that this was not a meeting to welcome humanity into galactic society. This was a show trial designed to humiliate and diminish his species before the real business began. Resonance Prime's crystalline form shifted to a deeper blue color. The Council has discussed the human situation extensively. Your species shows potential, but you are clearly not ready for full membership in galactic civilization. You lack the sophistication, the technology, and frankly, the evolutionary development necessary to function as equals among us. However, Rex continued, his reptilian features arranging themselves into what might have been a smile, we are not without mercy. The Council is prepared to offer humanity a generous arrangement. You will provide raw materials from your system. Your people will serve as a labor force for various Council projects. In return, we will provide protection from the dangers that exist in this galaxy and access to basic technologies that will improve your primitive living conditions. David's jaw tightened. And if we refuse this generous offer? The chamber fell, silent. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Refusal is not really an option, Rex said softly, his voice carrying an unmistakable threat. The galaxy is a dangerous place for unprotected species. Pirates, resource raiders, hostile entities that consume entire worlds. Without Council protection, humanity would not survive its first encounter with the real threats that exist out here. You have one standard galactic month to consider our offer, Resonance Prime announced. Return to your world. Discuss this with your leaders. When you come back, we expect to hear your acceptance of our terms. David stood slowly, his mind racing. Everything about this situation felt wrong, but he was one man facing the combined might of 12 advanced civilizations. I will relay your offer to Earth's government. Excellent, Rex rumbled. I do hope your leaders are more realistic than some species we have encountered. It would be unfortunate if Earth required a more direct demonstration of why Council protection is necessary. As David left the chamber, he heard the delegates already beginning to discuss the division of Earth's resources. They talked about which minerals would be most valuable, how many humans would be needed for various labor projects, and which council member would oversee the colonization process. The walk back through the station's corridors felt different now. The shifting walls seemed more ominous, the alien creatures more threatening. David realized that humanity had just been given an ultimatum disguised as an opportunity. Back on his ship, David activated the quantum communicator and began composing his report to Earth. He chose his words carefully, knowing that what he said next would determine humanity's future among the stars. The Council had made their position clear. They saw humans as primitive, violent, and weak. They expected submission. David smiled grimly as he sealed the message. The Council was about to learn something important about humanity. They had studied human history and seen only violence and conflict. What they had failed to understand was that all that violence had taught humanity something valuable. It had taught them how to win wars. The message fired off toward Earth at faster-than-light speed, carrying with it the beginning of what would become the greatest miscalculation in galactic history. The emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council took place in a bunker carved deep into the Swiss Alps. President Maria Santos looked around the table at the most powerful military and scientific minds on the planet. The holographic display showed David Wells' complete report from the Galactic Council meeting, and the silence in the room was heavy with implications. "So they want us to become their slaves," General Tom Blake said finally, his weathered face showing no emotion. "They think we're primitive and weak." Dr. Lisa Chen, the head of Advanced Weapons Research, scrolled through the data on her tablet. "Their mistake. They looked at our history and saw chaos. They didn't see adaptation." "Explain," Santos said. "Every war humanity has ever fought taught us something new," Chen continued. "We learned to fight in forests, deserts, mountains, and oceans. We developed weapons for every environment, every situation. We created strategies for fighting enemies who were stronger, faster, and better equipped than us. The Galactic Council species have been at the top of the food chain for so long that they've forgotten how to deal with dangerous prey." Commander Alex Rodriguez leaned forward. "What's our timeline?" "1 month," Santos replied. 1 month to decide whether humanity bows down or fights back. Blake smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Good thing we've been preparing for this scenario for the past 10 years, Santos nodded. "When humanity had first achieved faster-than-light travel, they had sent out exploratory missions. What they found was a galaxy dominated by established powers who did not welcome newcomers. The smart thing to do was prepare for conflict while hoping for peace. Project Deep Strike is fully operational," Blake continued. "We have weapons and strategies specifically designed to counter technologically superior enemies. The question is whether we're ready to implement them." "Show me," Santos said. The lights dimmed, and the holographic display changed to show a three-dimensional map of the Sol system. Red dots appeared throughout the display, marking defensive positions that had been secretly constructed over the past decade. "The outer system is protected by quantum disruption fields," Chen explained. "Any ship entering our space will find their energy weapons and shields failing at the worst possible moment. We've been studying captured alien technology from crashed ships and abandoned equipment. Their weapons are powerful, but they all work on the same basic principles. Principles we can disrupt." Rodriguez activated another section of the display. "The Ghost Fleet is deployed and ready. 50 ships built specifically for stealth operations. No energy signatures, no heat emissions, minimal electronic activity. They're invisible to the scanning methods used by Council species." "Our ships are smaller than theirs," Blake added. "But that's an advantage. We can hide in asteroid fields, behind planetary bodies, anywhere they don't expect us. And our weapons are kinetic-based. Physical projectiles moving at incredible speeds. Their shields are designed to deflect energy weapons, not solid matter." Santos studied the display carefully. "What about their numbers?" "They have 12 species and thousands of ships." "Numbers only matter if you fight fair," Chen said. "Humanity has never been good at fighting fair. We've always been better at fighting smart." The display shifted to show intelligence data gathered from hidden monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. For years, Earth had been secretly observing alien military operations, studying their tactics, learning their weaknesses. "The Vorthak rely entirely on energy-based systems," Rodriguez explained. "EMP weapons will shut them down completely. The Luminari are energy beings, but they need containment fields to maintain coherence in normal space. Disrupt those fields, and they disperse into nothing. The Grex Empire uses massive ships with powerful weapons, but they're slow and predictable. Each species has adapted their military to fight others like themselves," Blake said. "They follow rules of engagement that are thousands of years old. Honor codes, traditional battle formations, predictable strategies. They've never faced an enemy that doesn't play by their rules. Santos leaned back in her chair. The weight of the decision was enormous. If we fight them, there's no going back. This becomes a war for survival. It already is a war for survival, Chen said quietly. They've made it clear that submission is our only option. Everything else they said was just pretty words to make slavery sound reasonable. What about our colonies? Santos asked. We have settlements in 14 systems now. All fortified, Rodriguez replied. Hidden weapon platforms, defensive installations, disguised as mining operations, supply depots that can support military operations for years. If they want to control human space, they'll have to take it one system at a time, and we'll make them pay for every planet. Blake activated a new section of the display. But defense is just the beginning. The best way to survive a war with superior enemies is to make them stop wanting to fight you. We've identified critical infrastructure in every council member's territory, power generation, communication networks, supply lines. We can't match them in open battle, but we can make their civilization stop working. Psychological warfare, Chen added. We've been monitoring their communications for years. We know about the corruption, the exploitation, the lies they tell. Their own people. Information warfare can be just as effective as kinetic weapons. Santos looked around the table at these people she had trusted with humanity's future. Are you telling me we can win? We're telling you we can make them regret starting this fight, Blake said. The question is whether Earth is willing to become what the galaxy needs us to become. Which is? The most dangerous species in the galaxy, Rodriguez said simply. They want to treat us like animals. Animals bite when cornered. The room fell silent as Santos considered their options. Outside this bunker, 4 billion humans went about their daily lives, unaware that their future was being decided in this moment. Approve all operations, Santos said finally. Begin implementation of deep strike protocols. Send a message to David Wells. Tell him to inform the Galactic Council that Earth declines their offer. What reason should he give? Blake asked. Santos smiled, and for the first time since the meeting began, she looked truly dangerous. Tell them that humanity has decided to chart its own course among the stars. Let them figure out what that means. As the meeting ended and the participants left to begin preparing for war, Santos remained in the bunker looking at the display. The red dots marking Earth's defensive positions seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Soon, the galaxy would learn something that humans had always known. The most dangerous predator was the one that looked harmless until it was too late to run. Admiral Rex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Galactic Dominion, watching as 200 ships from 6 different council species moved into formation around him. The massive fleet stretched across space like a metallic constellation, each vessel bristling with enough firepower to level a planet. This would be the largest show of force the Council had deployed in over a century. Remind me again why we need so many ships for one primitive world, grumbled Commander Thex of the Vorthak forces. His crystalline body pulsed with impatient energy. Because examples must be memorable, Rex replied, his reptilian features arranged in a predatory smile. When word spreads of what happened to the humans, other species will think twice before defying Council authority. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Rex expected to find frantic human ships fleeing, in terror, or perhaps a desperate delegation ready to surrender. Instead, his sensors showed mostly empty space. A few civilian transports moved between planets, and some research stations orbited the outer worlds, but nothing that looked like military preparation. Scan for defensive installations, Rex ordered. Nothing significant detected, reported his sensor officer. Some satellites around the inner planets, a few mining operations in the asteroid belt. No energy signatures indicating major weapons or shield systems. Rex felt a mixture of disappointment and contempt. The humans weren't even going to put up a fight. Open a communication channel to Earth. The main screen flickered to life, showing President Santos in what appeared to be a simple office. She looked calm, almost bored. "Admiral Rex," she said politely, "I assume you're here about our decision to decline your offer." "I am here to teach your species about the consequences of defying the Galactic Council," Rex replied. "Surrender, now, and your people will be treated according to the terms we originally offered. Continue this foolish resistance, and the terms will become much less generous." Santos nodded as if considering his words. "I appreciate the warning. Unfortunately, Earth's position remains unchanged. We will not submit to Council authority." Rex's temper flared. "Then you will learn why submission is your only option. We will begin with a demonstration. Your Mars colonies will be destroyed as an example of Council power." "That would be unfortunate," Santos said, her tone suggesting she was discussing the weather. "I hope you've considered all the possible outcomes of that decision." The transmission ended, leaving Rex staring at a blank screen. The human leader's calm confidence was unsettling, but he pushed the feeling aside. Primitive species often showed false bravery before reality set in. "Target the Mars orbital stations," Rex commanded. "Fire when ready." The lead ships of the fleet aligned their weapons with the red planet. Energy beams lanced through space, brilliant streams of destruction that could melt through any known material. Rex watched with satisfaction as the beams approached their targets. Then space exploded around his fleet. The first indication of trouble was when 3 of his lead destroyers simply vanished in balls of fire and debris. The second was when his flagship's shields flickered and died as something invisible struck them with the force of a meteor impact. "Report!" Rex roared over the chaos that had erupted on his bridge. "Unknown contacts decloaking throughout the fleet." His tactical officer shouted, "Multiple impacts on our ships. Shield generators are failing across the formation." On the main screen, Rex watched in horror as dozens of human ships seemed to materialize from empty space. They were smaller than Council vessels, dark and angular, moving with a predatory grace that reminded him uncomfortably of hunting creatures from his homeworld. "How are they penetrating our shields?" Rex demanded. "They're not using energy weapons," the tactical officer replied, his voice tight with fear. "Solid projectiles moving at extreme velocity. Our shields aren't designed to stop kinetic impacts of this magnitude." Rex watched as a human ship no larger than a Council scout vessel fired a stream of metal slugs at one of his cruisers. The projectiles punched through the energy shields as if they weren't there, tearing holes in the hull that vented atmosphere and crew into space. "Return fire! All ships, engage the humans immediately." The Council fleet's response was swift but ineffective. Energy beams lanced out toward the human ships, but they seemed to anticipate every shot. The smaller vessels danced between the attacks, using the bulk of Council ships as cover, striking and fading before return fire could find them. Commander Rodriguez watched the battle from his command ship, the Retribution. His tactical display showed the positions of every Council vessel, their weapon status, their likely next moves. The AI systems that had been analyzing alien combat patterns for years were feeding him information faster than any Council commander could process it. Ghost 7. You have 3 destroyers converging on your position. He transmitted to one of his pilots. Confirmed control. Breaking toward the asteroid field. They won't follow me in there. Rodriguez smiled. The aliens had been fighting in the clean vacuum of deep space for so long that they had forgotten how to use terrain to their advantage. Human ships were designed to fight anywhere, in any environment, using whatever cover was available. All units, activate quantum disruption fields on my mark, Rodriguez commanded. 3, 2, 1, mark. Throughout the Sol system, hidden devices that had been deployed years earlier came online. The effect was immediate and devastating. Council. Ships that had been firing energy weapons suddenly found their power systems fluctuating wildly. Shields collapsed, weapons shut down, and life support systems struggled to maintain function. "What's happening to our systems?" Rex demanded, but his crew had no answers. The sophisticated technology that the Council species had relied on for millennia was failing in ways they had never encountered. A new voice cut through the communication chaos, cold and professional. "Council Fleet, this is Commander Rodriguez of the Human Defense Force. Your ships are disabled. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to the laws of war." "Never!" Rex snarled into his communicator. "The Galactic Council does not surrender to primitive species." "As you wish," Rodriguez replied. "All units. These ships came here to commit genocide against our people. Show them what happens to those who threaten Earth." The human ships moved in for the kill with mechanical precision. They targeted specific systems on each Council vessel, taking out weapons, engines, and communications in surgical strikes. Rex watched his mighty fleet being dissected piece by an enemy he had dismissed as barely more than animals. Within 6 hours, the most powerful military force the Council had assembled in decades was reduced to floating wreckage and crippled hulks. Rex's own flagship drifted powerless, its fusion reactors offline, life support running on emergency power. "Council Fleet, this is Rodriguez," came the human commander's voice one final time. "You came here to teach us a lesson about strength. Consider your education complete. Any ship that attempts to restore power or flee the system will be destroyed. You will remain here until Earth decides what to do with you." Rex stared at the tactical display showing the positions of his defeated fleet. 200 ships, the pride of 6 civilizations, had been neutralized by a force they had assumed was no threat at all. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Rex of the Grex Empire began to understand what fear felt like. News of the Sol system disaster spread through galactic communication networks faster than any military force could move. Within days, every Council world knew that their most powerful fleet had been completely destroyed by the primitive humans they had dismissed so easily. The response from the remaining Council members was swift and predictable. Emergency sessions were called on every Council homeworld. The Luminari High Assembly flickered with panicked energy patterns. The Thornwood Collective's ancient grove mines rustled with urgent whispers. The crystalline cities of the Vorthak rang with harmonics of alarm and rage. "This cannot stand," declared Supreme Resonance, the eldest of the Vorthak Leadership Council. "If word spreads that the humans defeated our enforcement fleet, every tributary species in the galaxy will consider rebellion." "The humans must be exterminated completely," agreed high-energy form Nexus of the Luminary. "No trace of their civilization can remain to inspire others." 8 of the 12 Council species committed their entire military forces to what they called the Human Extermination Campaign. Massive fleets began moving toward human space from every direction, carrying weapons, designed to destroy entire planets. This would not be another punishment expedition. This would be genocide on a galactic scale, but Earth was not waiting passively for the next attack. In hidden bases throughout human-controlled space, President Santos and General Blake were implementing Strategy Ragnarok, humanity's total war doctrine. What the Council didn't know was that humans had been secretly establishing colonies and military installations in dozens of systems over the past decade. Phase 2 is now active, Blake transmitted to Commander Rodriguez, who was leading the newly formed Human Expeditionary Fleet. All restrictions are lifted. Rules of engagement are now total warfare protocols. Rodriguez acknowledged the transmission from his flagship, the Vengeance, as it led a battle group toward the First Council.
Target.
Unlike the defensive action at Sol, this would be humanity taking the fight to the enemy. His tactical display showed 18 different strike forces moving simultaneously toward Council territories. Remember, Rodriguez addressed his fleet commanders, we're not here to conquer their worlds. We're here to make their civilization stop working. Hit the targets, leave the message, and get out before they can respond. The first target was a Vorthak energy collection facility orbiting their twin suns. The massive crystalline structure gathered stellar radiation and transmitted it to a dozen different worlds, powering everything from cities to starships. Rodriguez's ships appeared at the edge of the system, moving fast and silent. Target acquired, reported his weapons officer. Crystal Matrix shows structural weaknesses at connection points 7, 14, and 23. Fire, Rodriguez ordered. Kinetic projectiles moving at incredible speeds struck the collection facility with surgical precision. The ancient structure, which had provided power for 1,000 years, shattered like glass. Chunks of crystal drifted away from the suns, no longer capable of gathering or transmitting energy. Before any Vorthak ships could respond, Rodriguez's fleet was already jumping to their next target, leaving behind a simple message broadcast. On all Council frequencies, Earth remembers, Earth does not forgive. Similar attacks were happening throughout Council space. Captain Emma Foster led Strike Group 7 against a Grex Empire communications relay that coordinated military movements across 50 systems. Her ships emerged from faster-than-light travel inside the relay's defensive perimeter, having studied the placement of every sensor and weapon platform for months. Multiple targets acquired, Foster reported to her weapons teams. Prioritize the quantum transmission arrays. Human missiles, armed with electromagnetic pulse warheads, struck every critical system simultaneously. The massive relay station went dark, cutting off communication between Grex military forces across half their territory. Foster's ships were gone before the local garrison even realized they were under attack. But they left behind more than just destruction. Hidden transmitters began broadcasting directly into Grex civilian communication networks, showing footage of council leaders discussing the division of human resources like livestock. Dr. Alan Moore's Information Warfare Division had been preparing for this moment for years. Teams of human hackers working with advanced AI systems had spent decades studying every council communication network, every data security system, every propaganda distribution method. Upload Package 7 to all Thornwood networks, Moore ordered from his command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. Let them see what their government really thinks of them. Across Thornwood space, civilian populations suddenly had access to classified documents showing how their leaders had been selling their people as laborers to other council species for centuries. The revelations sparked riots on a dozen worlds, as the plant-based species discovered they had been enslaved by their own government. But the most devastating human weapons were not missiles or bombs. They were ideas. Every council species had populations of workers, scientists, and ordinary citizens who had never questioned their government's authority. Human information warfare showed them the truth about council corruption, about the tributary, species kept in slavery, about the lies they had been told for millennia. Resistance movements are forming on 47 council worlds. Moore reported to President Santos during their daily briefing. Our psychological warfare campaigns are working better than we hoped. When people realize they've been lied to their entire lives, they don't tend to support their governments. Santos nodded, studying the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Human strike forces had destroyed over 200 major installations in the past month, and Council military response was becoming increasingly desperate and uncoordinated. "What about their retaliation fleets?" she asked. "Struggling," General Blake replied with satisfaction. "Without their communication networks, they can't coordinate movements. Without their supply lines, they can't maintain their ships. Without their civilian support, they can't recruit new crews. We're not just fighting their military, we're dismantling their entire civilization." The reports from the front lines painted a picture of council forces in complete disarray. The Luminary had lost 3 of their primary solar collection arrays, leaving entire sectors without power. The Vorthax crystal communication networks were failing as hidden human viruses spread through their data systems. The Grex Empire's fortress worlds were going silent one by one as their supply convoys were intercepted and destroyed. Commander Rodriguez received new orders as his fleet prepared for another strike. "All units, we have intelligence that the remaining council fleets are attempting to mass for a final assault on Earth. We're going to make sure they never get the chance to organize." "What's the target?" asked his second-in-command. Rodriguez smiled as he looked at the coordinates on his display. "The Council's primary military coordination center at Alpha Centris. If we take that out, their remaining forces won't be able to work together." As human forces prepared for what could be the decisive battle of the war, President Santos addressed the people of Earth from the same simple office where she had spoken to Admiral Rex months earlier. "My fellow humans," she began. 6 months ago, alien powers tried to make us slaves. They believed we were weak, primitive, and defenseless. Today, their fleets drift powerless in space. Their supply lines are cut. Their communications are destroyed. Their own people are rising against them." She paused, looking directly into the camera with eyes that had seen the rise of humanity from victims to victors. "They wanted to teach us about strength. We have become their teacher instead." The delegation ship approached Earth with its weapons powered down and its shields lowered, broadcasting surrender codes on every frequency. Inside the vessel, Resonance Prime of the Vorthax sat in what had once been a throne room designed to intimidate lesser species. Now the crystalline being flickered with colors that indicated fear, desperation, and the bitter taste of complete defeat. 6 months had passed since the Council's punishment fleet had been destroyed in the Sol system. 6 months during which the galaxy's most powerful civilizations had learned what it meant to fight an enemy that refused to play by their rules. The proud fleets that had dominated space for millennia now existed only as scattered survivors hiding in remote systems, afraid to show themselves. "Earth Control, this is the Council diplomatic vessel Last Hope," transmitted the ship's communication officer. "We request permission to approach for urgent negotiations." The response came from General Blake himself, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had won a war that everyone had expected him to lose. "Council vessel, you are cleared to dock at Station 7. Any deviation from the prescribed flight path will be considered an act of aggression." Resonance. Prime shuddered at the tone. These humans spoke to them the way the Council had once addressed tributary species. The reversal was complete and humiliating. The docking process was a study in contrasts. Where Council ships had once been escorted by honor guards and ceremonial displays, the human station was purely functional. Armed guards in simple uniforms directed the alien delegates to a meeting room that could have been found in any office building on Earth. President Santos entered the room without fanfare, accompanied by Blake and Rodriguez. She took a seat across from the alien delegation and waited. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Resonance Prime finally spoke. President Santos, we come seeking an end to hostilities, the Vorthax said, its voice carrying harmonics of submission that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. The Council is prepared to offer terms for peace. Santos studied the crystalline being with the same expression she might use to examine an interesting insect. Terms. You're in no position to offer terms. You're here to surrender. High energy form. Pulse of the luminary flickered with agitation. Surely some accommodation can be reached. The destruction has been devastating on both sides. Has it? Blake interjected. We've lost fewer than 3,000 people in this entire war. How many of your species are dead or displaced? The aliens exchanged glances that conveyed desperation. The human information warfare campaigns had been brutally effective. Dozens of Council worlds were in open rebellion against their governments. Civilian populations that had discovered the truth about Council corruption and slavery were demanding the heads of their leaders. Our preliminary terms are simple, Santos continued, sliding a data pad across the table. The Galactic Council is hereby dissolved. All tributary species are granted immediate independence. War reparations will be paid to every world the Council has exploited over the past 1,000 years. Resonance Prime's crystalline form flickered through several colors before settling on a deep purple that indicated shock. These terms would destroy our civilizations. Your civilizations were built on slavery and exploitation, Rodriguez said coldly. They deserve to be destroyed. Furthermore, Santos continued, a new galactic charter will be established based on equality and mutual respect. All species will have equal representation. All disputes will be resolved through negotiation, not force. The Luminari representative pulsed with desperate energy. This is impossible. The economic disruption alone would cause chaos across hundreds of systems. You should have thought of that before you tried to make slaves of humanity, Blake replied. The galaxy is going to learn to function without the Council's boot on its neck. General Krex of the remaining Grex forces, his reptilian features showing the strain of months of defeat, leaned forward. You cannot seriously expect us to agree to our own destruction. Santos smiled, and the expression was more frightening than any weapon. You seem to misunderstand your situation. This is not a negotiation. This is us informing you of what's going to happen. You can surrender now and retain some dignity, or we can continue this war until there's nothing left of your civilizations to surrender. You underestimated our species once, Rodriguez added. We were exactly as violent and dangerous as you claimed. The difference is that you assumed violence made us weak, when it actually made us the most effective killers this galaxy has ever seen. Resonance Prime's form flickered through desperate color patterns. We were wrong about your nature. We admit this. Surely peace is preferable to continued destruction. Blake leaned back in his chair, his expression showing no mercy. You weren't wrong about our nature. We are a dangerous species. We've been fighting and killing each other for our entire history. The only thing that's changed is that now we have a common enemy. But surely, as rational beings, we can find some middle ground, Pulse pleaded, its energy form dimming with desperation. The middle ground was when we first came to your council asking for peaceful relations, Santos replied. You chose to threaten us with slavery and genocide instead. Now you get to live with the consequences of that decision. The room fell silent as the alien delegates absorbed the finality of humanity's position. Through the station's windows, they could see the human fleet patrolling the space around Earth, sleek, dangerous ships that had proven capable of destroying anything the galaxy could send against them. What guarantee do we have that humanity won't simply become the new oppressors? Krex asked, his voice carrying the weight of a species facing extinction. Santos considered the question seriously. The same guarantee you gave the species you enslaved. None. The difference is that we're offering you a chance to earn your freedom through peaceful cooperation instead of condemning you to permanent servitude. Sign the Terra Accords, Blake said, placing a formal document on the table. And your species retain their independence and their right to self-governance. Refuse, and we continue dismantling your civilizations until there's nothing left to govern. Resonance Prime stared at the document that would end thousands of years of council dominance. And if we sign, what then? Then you go home and learn to live as equals instead of masters, Rodriguez replied. You develop trade relationships based on mutual benefit instead of exploitation. You contribute to galactic civilization instead of parasitically feeding off it. Some of your species may find the adjustment difficult, Santos acknowledged. Those who can't adapt to a galaxy where might doesn't make right will be removed from positions of power. Those who can adapt will find that peace is more profitable than war. The alien delegates huddled together, speaking in urgent whispers. Their crystalline, energy, and reptilian forms created an almost comical contrast as they debated the end of everything they had known. Finally, Resonance Prime spoke. If we agree to these terms, what becomes of humanity's role in this new galaxy? Blake's smile was predatory. We become what the galaxy needs us to become. The species that ensures no one ever tries to build another galactic council. You're making us the enforcers of this new order, Santos explained. When disputes arise, human mediators will help resolve them. When aggressive species threaten peaceful ones, human forces will intervene. When anyone tries to recreate the old system of exploitation, they'll discover why that's a very bad idea. Pulse flickered, with what might have been hope. So, humanity will rule the galaxy? Humanity will protect the galaxy, Rodriguez corrected. There's a difference. We don't want to govern other species. We just want to make sure no one else tries to enslave them. The negotiations continued for 3 days, but the outcome was never in doubt. One by one, the remaining council species agreed to the Terra Accords. The document was signed in the same simple room where the surrender had begun, with no ceremony or celebration. Just the quiet end of an era. As the alien delegates prepared to return to their worlds with news of the new galactic order, Resonance Prime approached Santos privately. You could have destroyed us completely, the Vorthax said, its crystalline form pulsing with colors that indicated curiosity mixed with fear. Why show mercy to those who showed you none? Santos looked out at the stars beyond the station's viewport. Because destroying you would have made us exactly what you claimed we were. Mindless animals driven by violence. We're better than that. But you are still the most dangerous species in the galaxy, Resonance Prime observed. Yes, Santos agreed, and that's exactly what the galaxy needs to keep the peace. 6 months later, Admiral David Wells, the diplomat who had first faced the Council's contempt, stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought Terra's Will as it completed a patrol of former Council space. The ship was one of dozens now flying regular missions throughout the galaxy, ensuring that the new order remained stable. "Status report," Wells requested from his command crew. "All systems peaceful, Admiral," reported his tactical officer. "The former Grex territories are fully compliant with the Accords. The Vorthak have established trade agreements with 6 independent species. The Luminari are actually helping to rebuild some of the infrastructure they used to exploit." Wells nodded with satisfaction. The transition hadn't been perfect, but it was working. Species that had been enslaved for millennia were learning to govern themselves. Former Council worlds were discovering that cooperation was more profitable than domination. "Incoming transmission from Earth Command," his communications officer announced. President Santos appeared on the main screen, her expression showing the weariness of someone who had guided humanity through its greatest challenge. "David, how are things out there?" "Quiet, Madam President. Almost boring compared to the war." Santos smiled. "Boring is good. Boring means the system is working." "Any word on the colony applications?" Wells asked. "Approved. 17 new. Human settlements will be established in former Council space, all with the permission and cooperation of local species. We're not conquerors, but we're not going anywhere either." As the transmission ended, Wells looked out at the stars and reflected on how much had changed. A year ago, humanity had been dismissed as primitive and weak. Now they were the galaxy's guardians, respected through fear but working toward something better. The Galactic Council had been right about one thing. Humanity was a dangerous species. They had simply failed to understand that sometimes danger was exactly what the galaxy needed to learn the value of peace. The new order would be built on mutual respect and cooperation, but it would be enforced by the species that had proven it could destroy anyone who threatened that peace. Humanity had become the galaxy's apex predator, not to dominate, but to ensure that no one else ever could. In the end, the Council's greatest mistake had been believing that strength came from technology and numbers. They had forgotten that true strength came from the willingness to fight for what was right, no matter the cost. Humanity had reminded them of that lesson in the most permanent way possible.